The dust rose like a curse behind the horse, swirling in the mid-morning heat. May Delaney's wrists burned where the rope bit into them, each tug a raw reminder that she was cargo, not kin. Her boots scraped the rocky ground, long since torn and useless, her bare feet now bloodied and blistered. Her dress, once pale yellow and modest, clung to her legs in filthy strips. The sun showed no mercy, and neither did Jed Delaney, who swayed in the saddle ahead of her, whiskey sloshing in the battered canteen at his side. He hadn't spoken in over an hour, but she knew better than to take comfort in that. Silence meant the bottle had the reins. When it loosened its grip, words would come, ugly, slurred things that always ended in fists or worse. Her jaw still ached from last night, though she'd learned not to reach up and touch the bruise. He didn't like when she called attention to her pain. Drebone Ridge came into view like a wound on the horizon. The town slumped against the rocks, its crooked shacks and warped saloons baking under the heat. The auction was today. That's what he'd said. You cost me 2 mules and a saddle, girl. You're gonna earn your damn keep. She'd heard stories of what happened to girls sold at the block. Jed hadn't said if it would be for marriage, labor, or something fouler. Maybe he didn't care. Maybe it was just about the whiskey, always the whiskey. As they passed the rusted town sign, heads turned. A few men leaned against posts, chewing tobacco, watching her with idle amusement. One spat and muttered, "Ain't that Delaney's kid?" Another snorted, "Looks like he's bringing her to the county fair. Hope he gets a blue ribbon." Jed stopped outside a feed store where the auction block was crudely set up. A few planks nailed across barrels, a rusted bell on a post to signal bidding. He dismounted unsteadily, grabbing the rope and yanking her forward. May stumbled, catching herself before she hit the dirt. Her arms trembled from the long drag, her knees close to buckling. Jed slapped the dust off his shirt, adjusted his hat, and waved to a man with a ledger. "Got one more for sale, Roy. Strong enough to scrub floors or bear brats. Whichever pays better." Roy blinked at her. "She even 16? Jed shrugged. "Old enough to bleed, old enough to earn." The laughter that followed cracked like a whip. May didn't speak. She kept her chin up, though her eyes stung. Pride was all she had left, and even that felt borrowed. She would not cry. Not here. Roy made a note in his book. "We'll get to her after the stock. Stand her there." Jed shoved her onto the platform. She caught herself against a barrel, ignoring the splinters in her palms. Dust clung to her sweat-soaked skin. Somewhere a horse neighed. The sun crawled higher. Men gathered. Some glanced her way with interest, others with indifference. A few brought their sons. One boy, no older than 10, stared at her with wide eyes before his father cuffed him for looking. A bid was placed on a chestnut mare. Then a rusted plow. Then a sack of barley. May didn't know how long she stood there, her legs trembling beneath her, but time dragged like the rope had. Roy eventually raised his hand. "Now then," he announced, "we got a special deal from Jed Delaney, who swears on his daddy's grave she's more than worth the cost of feed." Jed stepped forward, grinning wide. "She can cook, clean, haul water, milk a cow, and don't talk much. Best of all, no husband to get in the way." A few chuckles. One man with a gut like a barrel scratched his chin. "What's the starting bid?" $2, Jed said. Silence. Someone muttered, "2? Hell, I'd pay that just to make her stop looking at me like that." "Eyes like knives," another agreed. May stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. She would not drop her gaze. She would not shrink. The silence stretched. Someone hawked and spat. Another shuffled away. Then a voice spoke low and clear, "I'll pay you nothing." Heads turned. A man stood on the edge of the crowd, coat dusted in road grime, wide-brimmed hat shadowing his eyes. His boots were worn but clean, the silver buckles dulled by time. A rifle rested across his back, but his hands were empty. Quiet followed him like a second shadow. Jed blinked. "What?" The man stepped forward. "You heard me. Not a dollar. Not a dime. But if you try to hurt her again, you die. That's the offer." A hush fell. Even the horses stopped stomping. Jed's face turned red. "Who the hell do you think you are?" The man met his gaze. "The man who's not afraid to dig your grave." It wasn't a threat. It was fact. You could hear it in the weight of the words. Roy looked between them. "Now hold on, let's not bring pistols into a business exchange." Jed reached for his belt and the man didn't flinch. He didn't move at all. May held her breath. Jed froze. Looked at the crowd. Looked back at the stranger. The laughter was gone now. The heat seemed to thicken. Jed's hand dropped. "She ain't worth the trouble," he muttered, stepping back. "Take the girl." "Hell with it." The man nodded once. Walked up to the platform, took out a knife and cut the rope from May's wrists. Up close, he smelled of horses and sagebrush. Not whiskey. Not sweat. He didn't look at her like she was meat. He didn't look at her much at all. "You can walk?" he asked. She nodded, voice caught in her throat. He stepped back. "Then let's go." May stepped down from the platform. The crowd parted as they walked through. Jed didn't meet her eyes. Roy didn't speak. The bell above the auction block swayed in the wind, silent. They walked beyond the town's edge, where the land stretched wide and the noise of men faded. A paint horse waited, saddled and patient. The man helped her mount, careful not to touch her skin, then swung up behind her on another. They rode in silence. Hours passed. The sun sank lower. Coyotes called from the distant hills. Finally he spoke. "Name's Calder Beck. You need rest. I've got a place up near Split Rock. Quiet. Safe." May didn't answer. He didn't seem to mind. The ranch came into view just as the sky turned copper. It wasn't much, 2 cabins, a barn, a well, but it didn't stink of sweat and blood. He helped her down. Led her to a small room with a bed, basin and shelf. "You'll find water there. Clean clothes on the chair. You hungry?" She nodded barely. "I'll make stew." She sat on the bed. Her legs felt like hollow sticks. The mattress was thin but soft. Cling. She stared at her hands, raw, bleeding, but hers. Later, stew in her belly and warmth in her limbs, she sat by the fire while Calder sipped coffee and said nothing. A pistol rested on the table between them. But he'd placed it in plain view as if to say, "If you want to take it, take it." May didn't. When he stood, he nodded once. "If you want to run in the morning, that's your choice. Just let me know so I don't go looking." He walked to his own room, boots thudding softly on the wood floor. May sat alone for a while longer. The fire cracked. Outside, the wind stirred the dry leaves. She could still hear Jed's voice in her head, still feel the bite of the rope on her skin. But here, in this quiet place, something stirred beneath the pain. A flicker. Not safety. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. She lay down, not bothering to undress, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep came slow. And with it, a thought. If Calder Beck had meant to hurt her, he'd had every chance. So why hadn't he? She didn't know. But she intended to find out. May woke to the smell of coffee and wood smoke, a combination so strange in its gentleness that for a moment she didn't move. She stared at the ceiling, waiting for the ache to start, for the shout or the crash of something thrown. But there was only silence, broken by the crackle of fire and the soft clink of a spoon stirring in a mug. Her hands, bruised and swollen, ached as she pushed herself up. The rope burns across her wrists throbbed beneath the bandages someone had wrapped, tight but not cruel. Her feet were clean. Her dress, the same ruined one, had been folded neatly on the chair. She'd slept in a shirt too big for her, likely Calder's, though it didn't smell like sweat or blood. Just soap. She stepped out into the main room, and there he was, sitting in the same chair by the hearth, coffee in one hand, a book in the other. Calder Beck looked up, not startled, not searching. Just looked. "You rest all right?" May didn't answer. She glanced at the door instead, still closed, still unlocked. "You're free to go if you want. I won't stop you." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Why'd you do it?" He set the mug down, book closed beside it. "Because no one else did." "That's not an answer." He nodded. "It's the only one I got." May stood, unmoving. Calder didn't offer anything else. No pity. No platitudes. Just space. He pointed to a plate on the table. "There's eggs. Bread too. It's plain but it's warm." She didn't say thank you, not because she wasn't grateful, but because the words felt foreign in her throat. She ate in silence, feeling him watching without watching, like a man used to being near danger but never pressing into it. She studied him in turn. His face weathered but not old, jaw lined with stubble, hands calloused but steady. A man who worked more than he spoke. A man who, for reasons he hadn't shared, had pulled her out of hell and handed her water instead of fire. After breakfast, Calder offered her a job. Nothing big, feeding the chickens, filling the troughs, fetching water. No payment, just something to do. May hesitated, then nodded. Work was easier than thinking. The days slipped by in quiet rhythm. Calder kept his distance, not unkindly, but with the care of someone who knew not to touch an open wound. May did what she could, mucked the stalls, cleaned tools, chopped onions for stew. She didn't ask questions. Neither did he. But questions still lived in the corners. One afternoon, while hanging laundry on the line, she caught Calder staring into the hills, rifle across his lap, jaw set like stone. She walked up behind him. "You expecting someone?" No, he said, then paused. But men like your father don't forget slights. Not the kind I gave him. May chewed on the inside of her cheek. You think he'll come? I think if he does, I'll be ready. She believed him. Still, fear curled under her ribs like smoke. That night, she woke from a dream of fire and choking rope. When she padded out to the main room, Calder was still up, tending to a blade with a whetstone. He didn't look surprised to see her. You sleep light, she said. He shrugged. Hard to sleep deep when you've seen how the world turns. Where'd you learn to fight? He didn't answer for a while. Then, the army. Long time ago. You kill anyone? His eyes didn't flinch. Yes. Did they deserve it? Another pause. Some of them. May sat on the edge of the hearth, the heat soothing her bare feet. What about the ones that didn't? He didn't answer. The whetstone moved slower. You ever hurt someone that didn't deserve it? Once, he said. Just that. And nothing more. She thought about pressing, but something in his voice told her to leave it. That the wound beneath that answer was deeper than even hers. Over the next few days she noticed little things. The way Calder always cleaned his boots before stepping inside. How he never left his rifle more than arm's reach away. The fact he cooked in silence but hummed when he cleaned tools. He never struck her, never raised his voice, never touched her skin, not even by accident. And yet she still flinched when he walked too close. He never said anything about it. She began sleeping through the night. Then the sheriff came. It was just afternoon, the sky cloudless and cruel. A horse's approach stirred the chickens into nervous flutters. Calder stepped onto the porch before the rider dismounted. Sheriff Weller was a thick man with a sunburned nose and too many rings. His mustache twitched as he smiled without warmth. Beck, he said. Been a while. Calder gave a nod. Weller. The sheriff looked around. Heard tell you picked up a stray. One of Jed Delaney's. That true? May stood just inside the door, out of sight, her breath stuck in her throat. Calder didn't look back. Not your concern. Weller chuckled. Thing is, it kinda is. Delaney's gone missing. Ain't showed up in town, ain't showed up drunk, which's how we know something's off. Folks are talking. Thought I'd check in. Calder tilted his head. You think I did something to him? Not saying that. Just saying, Delaney's kin ends up with a man like you, folks might wonder. Especially when that kin's, well, pretty. May wanted to step out to say something. But fear held her. Not of Calder. Of the world. Of Weller. Calder's voice darkened. You done? Just a skin. Jed's a bastard, sure, but he's still county folk. If something happened, I gotta write it up. Then write it. Weller squinted. You got a problem, Beck? No. But if I did, I wouldn't come asking questions I already knew the answer to. The silence stretched. Weller shifted his weight. If she's here, I hope she's safe. That's all. She is. The sheriff nodded and rode off, dust kicking behind him. May stepped onto the porch, eyes locked on the trail the sheriff left. He's going to tell people, she said. Let him. What if they come? They will. She studied him. Why aren't you scared? Calder looked out at the hills, voice low. Because I've already lost everything worth fearing for. May said nothing. But the words sat with her like stones in her belly. That night she asked about his sister. She hadn't meant to. The question slipped out while they shelled beans by the fire. You had someone once, didn't you? He didn't look up. Her name was Lena. Where is she now? Gone. May waited. She was taken when I was away. They sold her to a man who ran a saloon in Burn Hollow. By the time I found her, the place was already burning. May felt her throat tighten. You tried to save her? I wasn't fast enough. She reached for another bean, fingers shaking. That why you helped me? His eyes met hers then, clear and steady. I couldn't save her. But I could save you. She looked away, blinking hard. You don't even know me. I don't need to. For a long time neither spoke. When she finally rose to go to bed, Calder said quietly, If you stay, you don't owe me anything. Not work. Not words. Not thanks. May paused. Why? Because freedom shouldn't come with strings. She nodded, throat too tight for words, and walked to her room. The wind outside howled through the eaves, wild and distant. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time someone had offered her something without wanting to take something else in return. Sleep came slow. But when it did, there were no dreams. Only the warmth of a fire, and the echo of words she didn't quite know how to believe. Freedom. No strings. But if that were true, what did that make her now? Not a prisoner. Not a daughter. Not a thing to be traded. Just meh. And maybe for the first time that was enough to keep going. The morning air hung thick with the promise of rain, the sky stretched tight with gray. May stood at the fence post, watching the herd move slow and lazy across the field. The animals knew before the sky did, heads low, steps cautious, tails flicking in agitation. She rubbed her sore hands, still getting used to the rhythm of ranch work, still building the calluses that would one day mean this life was hers, not borrowed. Calder leaned against the barn wall, arms crossed, eyes on the hills. "They're restless," she said without turning. "Storm's coming," he replied. She nodded, pulling her shawl tighter. "You always know before it hits." He shrugged. "Comes with the years. You start to feel it in your bones. Wind smells different. Ground hums a little." May didn't say it out loud, but she'd started feeling it too. Not in her bones, not yet, but in her gut. A shift, like something unseen moving closer. She didn't know if it was the rain or something darker. The ranch had settled into a pattern. Days of hard work, evenings of quiet meals, nights where sleep came more easily than it used to. Calder kept his distance, but not coldly. It was the kind of space that respected rather than neglected. She'd come to count on it, like the sunrise or the steady creak of the porch swing. But now there were signs. A dead rabbit left on the fence post, too clean to be animal kill. Boot tracks near the stream where no one should have walked. A shadow on the ridge one dusk that disappeared too quickly. May hadn't said anything at first. Maybe she didn't want it to be real. Maybe she wanted the peace to last a little longer. But Calder had seen it too. The air between them had changed, tense, tight, alert. "You think it's him?" she asked. "Could be," Calder answered, though his voice lacked certainty. "Or someone sent by him." She looked down at her hands. "I thought you scared him off." Calder's eyes narrowed. Fear don't always last. Especially not when wounded pride festers. May swallowed hard. "If he comes, if it really is him, I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Calder stepped away from the barn wall, his voice measured but steel beneath. "You didn't bring this trouble, May. I brought you. That's different." She didn't argue, but the guilt sat heavy in her chest. That night she couldn't sleep. The wind screamed through the trees, shaking the shutters. The fire popped and hissed as the first rain began to fall. Calder sat at the table, cleaning his rifle again, eyes flicking toward the door with each gust of wind. May came out of her room, blanket around her shoulders. He didn't look up. "I heard something," she whispered. He nodded. "So did I." He stood, motioning toward the window. "Stay low." May dropped beside the hearth as he moved with quiet purpose, checking the latch, adjusting the lantern. She watched him work, how calm he was, how precise. She wondered if it was always this way for him, waiting for something violent to arrive. Then came the knock. Not a bang, not a battering, just 3 slow, deliberate taps on the door. Calder's rifle was already in hand. He didn't move for the handle. "Who is it?" he called. No answer. May's heart thundered in her chest. "Step away from the door," Calder ordered. Still silence. Then a voice, low, rough, unmistakable. "I come for what's mine." May's blood ran cold. "Jet." She tried to stand, but her knees buckled. Calder glanced her way. "You know who it is?" She nodded, mouth too dry to speak. The voice came again. "Ain't got no quarrel with you, Beck. Just hand over the girl and I'll be on my way." Calder's tone was ice. "You're not walking out of here with anything but a bullet." A beat of silence, then a laugh. "You always did think yourself righteous. But that girl's Delaney blood and I aim to have her back." May stood now, the fear shifting into something hotter, anger maybe, or something close to it. She stepped beside Calder, trembling but upright. "I'm not yours," she said loud enough to carry through the wood. Jed didn't answer this time. Then the crash of gunfire shattered the quiet. The window exploded inward. Calder tackled May to the floor as splinters rained down. More shots rang out, 3 maybe 4, then footsteps running, boot heels scraping dirt. Calder was up in a breath, returning fire through the shattered window. May crawled to the hearth, pulling the rifle he kept near the logs. Her hands shook, but she worked the bolt, just like he'd shown her the week before. Then silence again. Calder motioned to her. "Stay here." "No," she whispered. "You're not ready." "I am." Their eyes locked. He hesitated, then nodded once. They stepped outside together, the rain now pouring, washing blood into the dirt where a man lay face down, rifle still in hand. Not Jed. Another man. Younger, thinner, already dead. May stared at the body, while rising in her throat. Calder checked the ridge with quick, practiced motions, then returned to her side. Just a hired gun, he said grimly. Jed sent someone ahead to soften us up. He'll come next, she said. Yes. They buried the man without words behind the barn under a crooked tree. May didn't ask his name. She didn't want it. He'd chosen the wrong side. Later, as the storm moved east and the sky cleared, they sat by the fire again. May wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the flames. I keep thinking, if I'd just run after that auction, if I hadn't come back here, he wouldn't have followed. Calder set down his cup. He'd have followed anyway. You think men like him ever let go? You'd be running for the rest of your life. I might still be. He nodded. Maybe. But not tonight. May looked at him, really looked. The shadows made his features harder, but his eyes stayed the same, calm, measured, endlessly steady. You ever get tired of fighting? She asked. Every day. Then why keep going? He leaned back in his chair. Because sometimes the thing worth protecting is more important than the peace you give up to do it. She understood that in a way she hadn't before. The ranch wasn't just land. It was a stand. A line drawn between cruelty and quiet. Between what had been done to her and what she would no longer allow. She stood slowly. If he comes again, I want to be ready. You will be. How do you know? Calder's voice was quiet. Because you stayed. The fire crackled. Outside the wind had died. But inside her, something had just begun to stir. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this. She would not run. Not anymore. Not from Jed, not from her past, and not from the strength that now began to surface inside her. She met Calder's gaze, square and unwavering. I want to learn how to shoot properly. He nodded, already knowing the answer had changed. Tomorrow we start. And just like that, May Delaney, the girl who'd been dragged behind a horse, auctioned like livestock and hunted by her own blood, began to forge the weapon she would one day become. The morning sun broke through the mist like a blade, slicing gold across the land. May stood by the fence with a rifle balanced across her arms, breathing slow, even breaths. Calder paced 10 paces away, holding up an old tin can he'd nailed to the post. Steady now, he said. Don't squeeze the trigger, press it. May inhaled. The rifle felt heavier than usual, or maybe it was her hands still remembering the shape of fear. She aimed, slowed her heartbeat, and fired. The shot cracked sharp across the open land, echoing into the hills. The tin can spun off the post and landed with a clatter. Calder gave a faint nod. Again. She reloaded, jaw clenched in concentration. 2 weeks had passed since the ambush. The trail had been quiet since, too quiet. Calder called it the hush before the storm. May could feel it in her marrow. Jed wasn't finished. He was waiting. Watching. She fired again. Missed this time. The bullet buried in the dirt a few inches shy. Don't rush it, Calder said, walking back. He's not here yet. May lowered the rifle. But he's coming. Yes. And we're not waiting with our heads down. Training filled their days now. Mornings with rifles. Afternoons with chores. Evenings spent reading maps and walking the land like it might turn traitor. Calder taught her how to spot tracks, how to tell when a horse had been ridden hard or walked slow. She learned to hide in plain sight, how to fire from cover, how to listen for the break of a twig that didn't belong. Some nights, they sat by the fire, and Calder told her about places he'd been, war zones, lost towns, men who vanished into deserts for gold and never came back. His stories were sparse, edges rough like they'd been filed down over time. May didn't press. She shared what she could in return. Memories of her mother before she died of fever, songs she used to hum while brushing her hair, a red ribbon she'd once won at the county fair before her father drank the prize money. Each piece she gave felt like reclaiming something. They became a kind of rhythm, Calder and May, ranch and rifle, silence and slow trust. But trust didn't stop nightmares. Some nights May woke gasping, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets. The image of rope burned into her mind. She didn't scream anymore. Just sat in the dark until her heart settled. One such night, she wandered to the porch. Calder was already there, sitting on the top step, his rifle laid across his lap. Couldn't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Too quiet. Yeah. It's the quiet that gets to you after a while. They sat in silence for a time. Then May asked, what if we leave? Calder didn't move. Run, you mean? She nodded. There's other places. Far away. Maybe he wouldn't follow. He looked up at the stars, voice low. Maybe. But I don't think you came here to hide, May. Not really. I came to survive. You've already done that. May didn't answer right away. The wind whispered through the long grass. Her eyes locked on the dark edge of the horizon. If we don't run, then we finish it. Calder gave the smallest nod. We finish it. 3 days later, the sheriff returned. Weller rode in at dusk, dust thick on his coat, a rifle slung low. He dismounted slow, like a man who didn't want to spook anyone. May met him at the gate, Calder at her shoulder. Trouble? Calder asked. Weller spat in the dirt. Jed's back in town. Not drinking. Not yelling. Just buying time. Hired 3 more hands. Mean ones. Ex-scouts from the war. Real quiet types. May's stomach tightened. He say anything? Calder asked. Weller's jaw twitched. Only that he's coming for what's his. Made sure I heard it good. Then let him come, May said. The sheriff looked her up and down, surprised at the steadiness in her voice. You sure about that, miss? I am. Weller nodded slowly. I'll ride out again if I can. Maybe bring help. Don't risk it, Calder said. They'll expect it. Weller hesitated, then turned to leave. Watch your backs. That night, they moved the animals to the back paddock, set traps near the ridge, reinforced the doors. Calder handed May 2 pistols, showed her how to reload fast. She wore one at her hip, the other across her chest. She didn't feel brave. She felt ready. When dawn broke the next day, the world held its breath. Hours passed. Then hooves. 4 riders came up the trail, dust rolling behind them like a curtain of smoke. Jed led the group, slouched in the saddle like a man already drunk on victory. His eyes found May first. Well, he called, ain't this a sight? My little girl, dressed like she means to fight. Calder stepped forward, rifle raised. One more step, Delaney, and you die where you sit. Jed smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. You don't own her, Beck. She's not a thing to be owned. Jed looked to May. Come now. You've had your fun. This ain't your world. This ranch, this man, none of it's you. You're Delaney blood, and that means something. May stepped forward. Her voice was steady, loud. It means nothing. Jed's eyes narrowed. You think I'll just let you spit in my face in front of these men? After all I gave you? You didn't give me anything. You took. You stole years I can't get back. But not anymore. Jed raised his hand to signal his men. A gunshot rang out. One of the hired hands fell from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Calder's rifle already cocked again. Next one's for you, he said. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked through the morning air. May dove behind the trough, returning fire with both pistols. Calder moved with brutal grace, each shot measured, final. One of Jed's men rushed the porch, only to collapse under May's aim. The last turned to run, but Calder's bullet found him mid-stride. Jed remained. He dismounted slowly, pistol in hand. You think this ends here, girl? I'm your blood. No, May said, stepping from behind cover, both pistols raised. You're just a ghost. Jed aimed. May fired first. His pistol dropped from his hand as he staggered, then collapsed in the dust. It was over in seconds. May stood still, smoke rising from her gun. Calder stepped beside her, checking Jed's body. No pulse. May stared down at the man who'd haunted every corner of her life. There was no triumph in it, just stillness. Emptiness. A space where fear had once lived. She whispered, He's not mine anymore. Calder looked at her. He never was. The sheriff arrived an hour later, too late for the fight but not for the aftermath. He helped with the bodies, didn't ask many questions. One look at May's face told him all he needed. By sunset, the land was quiet again. May walked the fence line alone, hands dirty, hair wind-blown, blood still on her boots. But she walked upright. Her shoulders didn't hunch. Her breath was deep, steady. She reached the ridge and looked back at the ranch, the barn, the fields, the house with its cracked windows and patched roof. It was hers now. Not because someone gave it to her. Because she'd fought for it. Because she'd survived. And now, finally, because she'd chosen it. The storm had passed, but the sky still burned gold. And in that light, May knew something for certain. She wasn't running anymore. Not ever again. The sun had risen, casting long shadows across the ranch, but May still stood on the porch, unmoving. The blood had long been washed from the soil, the last of Jed's hired guns buried out past the fence line under unmarked stones. The silence now wasn't hollow, it was earned. A quiet victory, not the kind that came with cheers or celebration, but one that settled deep in the bones like the first breath after a long drowning. Calder approached from the barn, coat dusted with straw, sleeves rolled. He moved differently now, looser, easier. Less like a man waiting for war. More like someone learning to live again. May noticed the change before she felt it in herself, but now it stirred in her too, quiet and uncertain. She sipped the coffee she'd brewed an hour ago. It had gone cold, but she didn't care. Her eyes scanned the land, each acre suddenly brighter, more defined. It was like looking at the world through a new lens. "You're still watching the ridge," Calder said. May gave a faint smile. "Habit dies hard. Not always a bad thing." She set the cup down. "You think it's truly over?" "I think he's in the ground. And I think you put him there." May looked away, not from shame but from the weight of it all. Killing him didn't feel like winning. "It wasn't supposed to," Calder said gently. She turned her gaze back to the hills. "So now what?" "That's your choice." A gust of wind swept the field, bending the tall grass like a sea. For the first time, the movement wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. May didn't respond. Not yet. Because she wasn't sure. What did come after revenge? What did she do with her hands now that they weren't clenched around a weapon? That evening they rode into town. Not for supplies. Not for help. For the first time, May rode in just because she could. The town had heard. News traveled faster than wagons. People stepped out of shops, mouths tight, eyes wide, watching her from behind crates and curtains. A few gave polite nods. Others looked at the pistol still holstered at her hips and turned away. She dismounted outside the general store. Calder tied his horse beside hers and waited. Inside, the bell rang sharp. May's boots echoed on the wooden floor. The owner, a thin older man named Pearson, watched her approach with hands that didn't quite stop trembling. "Miss Delaney," he said carefully. May paused, hearing her name aloud for the first time in weeks. "Just May," she replied. "I need nails, canvas, flour, and a bottle of the good whiskey if you're still hiding it." Pearson blinked, then smiled. "Ain't sold the good stuff in years. You're the first to ask straight." May reached into her coat and pulled a few coins from a worn pouch. "Consider it a new tradition." He slid the items across the counter without a word. As she gathered them, a girl stepped from the back room, barely 12, eyes wide. She looked at May like she was something out of a legend. "Is it true?" the girl asked. "You shot your daddy dead?" May met her eyes. "He wasn't a father." The girl nodded slowly. "Good." May left the store with the girl's gaze still following her. When she stepped onto the boardwalk, the wind picked up again, ruffling her coat. Calder was leaned against the post, arms crossed. "You ready to head back?" She looked up and down the street. "Not quite." They walked to the sheriff's office. Weller stood from his desk as they entered, hat already in his hand like he'd expected them. "You need anything?" he asked. Words gone quiet. "No one's left to follow Jed." May stepped forward. "I want to know what happens now. To the land. The papers are still in his name." "I can fix that," Weller said. "You tell me what you want. I'll make it legal." She didn't hesitate. "Split it in two. Half to me. Half to Beck." Calder blinked once but said nothing. "You sure?" Weller asked. May nodded. "He fought for it. He should own it too." "All right," the sheriff said, pulling out the paperwork. Calder waited until they stepped back outside before speaking. "You didn't need to do that." "I know," May replied. "But I'm not leaving." He looked at her, eyes shaded beneath his brim. "And me?" She turned to face him. "That's up to you." Their silence was thick, not tense, but full of unspoken words. Then Calder said, "If I stay, it won't be because of guilt. Or duty." "It better not," she said. He smiled just a little. "Then I guess I'm staying." They rode back in the dark, lanterns swinging from their saddles. May felt lighter in the saddle, like the weight that had lived in her chest was beginning to loosen. Not gone, but different. The days that followed were filled with work, repairs, planting, preparing for winter. Calder carved out a corner of the barn for a new tack room. May built a small garden beside the house, hands in the soil like she was planting something more than seeds. They laughed more. They spoke less but deeper. And sometimes, at dusk, May would stand by the fence and watch the horizon, not for danger but for the sunset. One afternoon, Calder handed her a small wooden box. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I've been working on." She opened it slowly. Inside lay a badge, not a sheriff's star, but a carved wooden emblem shaped like a hawk with wings spread. "It's yours," he said. "You earned it." May closed the box gently. "What does it mean?" "That no one owns you. That you don't answer to fear. That if someone tries to take you again, they answer to the hawk." Her throat tightened. She reached out and touched his hand. "You think they'll forget? The town?" "Maybe. Maybe not. But it doesn't matter anymore. You're not here to be remembered. You're here to live. May looked toward the hills again. This time there was no storm coming. No shadow in the trees. Just wind, sky, and land that finally belonged to her. The girl who had once been dragged behind a horse, tied and humiliated, now stood on her own 2 feet, unafraid. She had not simply survived. She had grown roots, built something stronger than stone or blood. And when she looked into Calder's eyes, storm-dark, steady as ever, she knew she'd never have to fight alone again. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't have to. As the sun dipped below the horizon, lighting the land in fire orange and crimson, May turned away from the fence, back to the house, back to the life she'd fought to claim. The story they'd carved into this wild land wasn't just about pain or vengeance. It was about choosing who you'd become, even after the world tried to break you. About finding love not in rescue but in shared scars. About standing finally tall and free. And somewhere in the wind, the past whispered one last time, before finally falling silent.